Who the hell can wait till morning? Talk now at latenightsportsradio.com.
Welcome into the Box Speak with Alex B. Smith and Bob Sullivan here on latenightsportsradio.com. Alex B. Smith of axsmithsports.com, sportsmemo.com, and kellyinvegas.com. Alex, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing really good, Bob. This is the rehearsals are all done and over with, and everything's getting ready for we get the full regular season now. Regular season opens up tomorrow night in college football. We get the final preseason games out of the way after tomorrow night, and then we go right into the NFL regular season. And got a lot of teams making some changes. A lot of some unfortunate injuries, circumstances popped up with a few teams now that teams are kind of shuffling around and making some changes, getting ready for the season. But the time is here now for these games to count, and everybody's got to kind of get their cards in the rope.
Yeah, and awful week if you placed a futures bet on the Vikings win totals. I hope Vikings fans who were saying that they were better off without Teddy Bridgewater are prepared for, life with Sean Hill, whether he was looking better in the preseason or not. Get ready for, a bad season when everybody's loading the box against Adrian Peterson. This injury, a non-contact knee injury where apparently they almost needed to amputate his leg or amputate below the knee.
Yeah.
I've never heard of an injury quite this severe on a non-contact type of thing.
Yeah. For those who aren't familiar with it, we heard everything that, it was a torn ACL and a dislocated knee. That was the initial report last night. But what actually happened was called a tibiofemoral dislocation. So what that basically means is that his femur, so that's the upper portion of his leg, his tibia, which we know as his shin, the lower leg, and his kneecap all became three separate independent things within his leg. It's amazing that he had no nerve or artery damage, because that's usually this is an accident you hear happening in car crashes, plane wrecks, things of that nature. This is not something you'd even hear of even a contact football injury, let alone non-contact. So thankfully, the trainers that were at Vikings practice, they acted quickly, and they were able to save his leg, and it would have taken a lot more for him to have possibly needed the amputation, but just the fact that would happen on the field is it's a very, very just scary, and it's truly a freak injury.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible to me that with how that happened. It just boggles my mind that something that severe could happen. I mean, even on a football field, but in injury or not, contact or non-contact, it just boggles my mind. And I mean, it makes you wonder: is this a year? Is this a 2-year? Or is this possibly done?
No, I don't think it'll be a career-ending injury, but I think it's going to be certainly much longer than a year. If you look at it, technically, this would be, the beginning of the regular season, so it's going to be at least 1 year from now, which means he won't be ready for Week 1 in 2017. If there's any kind of setbacks, or we'll see, he'll have the surgery later this week. We'll see how the rehab and everything goes. If everything goes as planned, my guess is that he would be back by possibly the middle of next season. So, the Vikings are going to roll with Sean Hill. Of course, we're hearing, some rumblings and rumors about possibly Mark Sanchez or maybe a couple other guys being signed. But the Vikings might end up possibly, depending on how things go, could end up drafting a quarterback next spring, because they're going to need a backup who's legitimately, solid. If they can find a guy who's good coming out of college next year, because he's more than likely not going to be ready and playing any preseason next year, or moving around for the most of the beginning of training camp.
Yeah, I mean, potentially looking at a Kaepernick, say he comes available. Yep. I don't know if you really want to go down that road at this point, but Sean, is it Glennon
Sean Glennon with the LA Rams. He had a good preseason. I've heard rumblings about possibly Christian Ponder, who's with the 49ers, could possibly return back to Minnesota. I've heard Michael Vick. I've heard T.J. Yates. I've heard Josh Freeman, who I really don't think we'll ever see back in the National Football League. That was on a list somewhere, but there's a lot of different quarterbacks that are bouncing around. Sean Sorensen, who was cut by the Vikings literally 2 days ago, has been picked up again, so they'll have a third quarterback. But it's tough. This Vikings team, I had them going as far as the NFC title game this year. I had them winning the division. And now they're definitely going to take a step back on my radar. That's affected my power rankings. The books have changed them basically from they were a 3.5-point favorite week 1 against Tennessee now to a pick'em in week 1. I think Bridgewater is worth at least 3.5, maybe 4 points overall, and I think they're going to at least 2 wins drop off, in my opinion, from what we'll probably see from the Vikings this year.
Well, off the NFL for a little bit. Don't really need, we'll get it a little bit in week 4, but main focus this week has to be week 1, college football. We get started tomorrow, Thursday, September 1st, Thursday night games. I mean, technically we got started last week with the game in Australia.
Yeah.
Still boggles my mind that we need that, but week 1, what caught your eye on these? Did anything catch your eye as far as lines go with the Thursday night games?
It's interesting because everybody's really been hyping how great of a week 1 card this is, and there are some huge marquee matchups from a strictly football fan view, and as far as talking about top teams in the country, this is an incredible week of action. We got South Carolina, Vanderbilt, going into Kansas State, Stanford, then the weekend. UCLA, Texas A&M, LSU, Wisconsin. A lot of big-name matchups. But these are games, me personally, I'm not really a huge fan of betting big-time games. As anybody who's listened to the show, and Bob, we talked about this for years now. I like watching. I like finding edges within smaller conference games that are a bit off the radar, and finding edges within those contests. And there's some of those as well. But the Thursday and Friday slate is not as entertaining. These are kind of the appetizers, if you will, leading into what will be a big card for Saturday. But I only have a few plays as of right now on the college card. I'm going to be playing a lot of first halves, so those numbers will be popping up as early as tonight and tomorrow, the day of games and so forth. So there's going to be some good matchups to watch. And I'm going to be, early in the season, you want to watch and look for things that you've seen and compare them with your notes. Kind of a good time to feel out and take notes and get a good feel for a team rather than just jumping. I know everybody likes to jump in and bet a lot of games early and get really excited, but this is not the time to divulge a bunch of your bankroll into these early numbers and things that we haven't seen yet. It's a good time to get acclimated back into football. Watch how these teams get back into the role of things and observe, and then get ready for more wagers throughout the year.
How do you treat week 1 rivalry games, whether it be Colorado State, Colorado, and how do you treat week 1 conference leadoffs?
Yeah, it's interesting. We don't see a lot of conference leadoff games in week 1. Usually, especially with the Power 5 schools, they usually want to start off with, a couple of cupcake opponents. Like I said, if they have some new coaching or new schemes, new players they want to get acclimated, usually don't, want to jump in right away with a game that matters. But when you have Colorado State, Colorado as a rivalry matchup, I think that's kicked off the year for, I want to say, as long as I can, at least the last 15 years I can remember, those two teams have always played each other within week 1 or week 2 of the season. It hasn't been a game that I've wagered on a whole lot. Those aren't two schools that I follow particularly close. If anything, I would follow Colorado State a little more in Mountain West Club. But you know that those teams are going to be fired up and ready for those games. So the preparation is going to be there, and the excitement, the anticipation is going to be a lot higher than, say, if Colorado was opening up against, Southern Utah. So, watching those games, observing those games, you get to really feel, how these two teams are going to play against top quality, competition for the most part, because they're going to be fired up to play against one another. Same can be said with South Carolina and Vanderbilt, two schools that looking to have possible down years. South Carolina, of course, with Will Muschamp taking over there as the head coach. The game that I'm shocked about as far as a conference matchup is Georgia Tech Boston College playing in Dublin, Ireland. And, of course, we talked about the whole college football overseas. It doesn't make a lot of sense. This game makes a little bit more sense than Cal Hawaii in Australia. But I was really shocked that Boston College and Georgia Tech, two ACC opponents, would agree to play each other, even though they're not within the same division, but still same conference overseas. This is a big game for both of these schools. Boston College had a horrible year last year, so they're trying to rebound and possibly have a good year. Georgia Tech could be seemingly on the decline. So it's interesting that these two would agree to play each other. Not so much they play each other early in the year, but to have a game in a completely neutral site means so much that it's going to be interesting to see. I don't know if I'll be up early for that game, to be honest. It kicks off at 6:30 a.m. Central, 4:30 a.m. for those in the Vegas and the Pacific area. So if you have a DVR, it might be a good time to put that to use. It's fascinating, though, that there's some really good matchups. The college football playoff has finally made its changes to the rest of the league or actually the rest of the nation, where teams know that having quality opponents, whether they win or lose, is more important than getting a giant 66-0 win over a 1AA team. So, it means nothing for Alabama to go blow out Charleston Southern. It's more important that they play well and at least get a good quality win, or even even if they lose a close game, but it's against a tough opponent like a Southern Cal. So it's nice to see that these schools aren't afraid to schedule these big time games and not have them not worry about affecting their record and so forth. We're seeing quality football throughout the year now.
Is there, of the big games this weekend, LSU, Wisconsin, we got Southern Cal versus Bama, we got Oklahoma versus Houston. I feel like I'm missing
North Carolina, Georgia.
Carolina, Georgia. You can even throw UCLA and Texas A&M into that mix as well. Of those games, the big games this week, what's one that kind of caught your eye as far as a larger spread than you anticipated?
Well, there was interesting. A lot of money came in on the USC-Alabama game. When that game opened early in the summer, I think Bama was around the 8.5 point favorite. And then the more modern openers came around, and they were around 10. Now we're seeing 11.5, seeing some 12s at some point. A little bit of buyback on Southern Cal once that number hit around 12. But and you wonder, okay, well, these are two really good opponents, and it's a neutral site game. Both fan bases travel well. But then when you really dig deep into it, okay, Alabama, they're playing at Jerry's World, in Arlington. Alabama wrapped up their season there. They've played a lot of games in this facility already, so they're kind of used to the field, the crowd, where everything is. They're a little more acclimated to this venue than Southern Cal might be. On top of that, you're talking about one of the greatest coaches in the history as far as giving time to game plan for a single 60-minute contest in Nick Saban. He's had all summer to prepare for the Southern Cal team. And, he's one of those guys that will, come in and really look to hammer the brakes off of an opening team. We've seen it time and time again where, this line might be a bit high. I remember the game when they played West Virginia. We saw that line get steamed up. I think they ended up closing. They were a 28, 29-point favorite. They still were able to just barely get within that number. I think they may have covered it by a few points, but they didn't hold back on West Virginia. They made short work of them. And I don't think it's going to be a complete blowout in this game, but I do think Alabama is going to be ready, and they're going to give Southern Cal a hell of a battle, a tougher battle than many might expect. Looking at taking those points.
Do with Nick Saban? I don't know. This may sound a little. At some point, I feel like he's doing a lot more interviews. He seems to be a little bit. I mean, in the last couple of years, he's become a lot more media friendly, except with Paul Feinbaum. But do you see at any point that him getting his ass kicked in one of these maybe not his ass kicked, but losing a week one game where, with this USC game, West Virginia, it didn't happen, but eventually, they're scheduling not great opponents, but decent enough opponents that one of these years it's going to get them. I kind of feel like this is their best shot at losing a week one game. Is this, in your opinion, the one time where Alabama might be a little complacent even after winning the national championship? They're going to get complacent. New quarterback. Is this the time they could lose week one?
This is the toughest of the, let's say, marquee week one opponents I would say Alabama's had in recent history. But I don't think there is going to be any much of a complacency from a Nick Saban team. We've yet to see that. And I get what you're saying. At some point we could. I don't, like I said, they're really selective in who they choose to play in these games. We're not going to see Alabama jump out and play LSU week one. We're not going to see Alabama team win a national title and go rematch with Clemson to open the week, kind of in the way that we see, Carolina, Denver playing week one in the NFL season. We're not going to see a number one, number two to open up the year. So Alabama, as long as they play these games, they're going to always kind of pick and choose a middle, well, they're not even middle of the road, but they'll choose a bottom team of the top 25, a top 40 team to battle against. They're not going to just go play a top 10 team right out of the gate. And so with that being said, yeah, Southern Cal will hang around in this game. I'm not going to play it, but if I had to play this game, I'd probably look at maybe taking points with Southern Cal first half, and then looking at Alabama back in the second half. I think there's a huge size discrepancy, in the battle in the trenches in this particular matchup is going to be the biggest key. So I think Alabama will end up winning out and probably covering this number. But at the same time, this early in the year, with certain teams, there's certain thresholds of point spreads, and obviously we usually either see closer double-digit spreads or we have the gigantic 4-touchdown, 5-touchdown favorites. So you have to kind of, condense and look at how that whole game's going to go, and look at track records of, how certain coaches and how certain teams play in those opening situations.
Where are you leaning as far as Notre Dame, Texas goes right now?
It's interesting because I liked Texas in this spot because it's a huge revenge spot for Texas. And of course now we've had the suspensions and the different things changing around with Notre Dame, which could be a bit of a distraction for the Irish. Texas, like I said, they've got a lot of changes now, brand new offense. This is, Charlie Strong's certainly on the hottest of hot seats this year. So looking at how this number really hasn't moved much, we're seeing, opened around 4.5 Notre Dame favorite. Now it's 3.5, some threes with some juice. So that means there's not a lot of people who are really buying into Texas right away, nor are they buying into the fact that the suspensions and the different things that have gone on off the field with Notre Dame, that they're going to affect them this much in this contest. So I lean with Texas. I think Texas will keep this close. I think this will be a much closer game, obviously, than last year's battle. But it's enough for me to stay away from it. I wouldn't be shocked to see anything. Anything could happen because it's a standalone game, Sunday night national TV. it'll be a fun game to watch, but this is definitely one I'll just strictly be observing.
And FSU versus Mississippi on Labor Day. Florida State usually, it seems like, didn't this used to be the Florida State-Miami spot for a while since Miami's gone to the ACC?
Yeah, this was for a while.
Why is this all of a sudden switched?
I don't know what the change is. I know last year, if I'm not mistaken, last year's Labor Day game was Virginia Tech, Ohio State. And I think that was a neutral site game.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, and so I'm not sure why this game bounces around. I don't really know what has changed much from that, and I'm guessing I couldn't really give you an answer to it. But I'm guessing obviously the ACC, SEC being the two premier conferences, they probably were, had a hand in the network saying, hey, we want to get, two clubs of our conferences to battle each other in this big, standalone spot. And this is a good matchup in my opinion. Florida State always comes out ready for these big games, but Ole Miss, they're a dangerous team, especially playing in neutral sites. I was looking at a stat earlier; they've covered eight of the last 9 neutral site games, be it a bowl game or a kickoff classic, setup like this. So it's gonna be, this will be a tough game. Both teams really good, tons of talent, of course, and these are schools that they don't rebuild, they reload as far as their talent goes. So should be a pretty close battle. Once again, another game that I probably will stay away from. Might look to play live as I'm watching it, but I have no pre-flop plays on the side of totals now.
Who are some coaches and who are some schools to stay away from week one who are usually fool's gold week one over the years?
Northwestern is one that comes to mind. They're always a tough team to read right out of the gate. They're going to be a talented team this year. They have some this is going to be another decent year for the Wildcats, but they're playing. They're in a tough spot playing against Western Michigan, a WAC team that is on the rise. Or sorry, the MAC rather. And a MAC team has beaten a Big Ten team in week one in each of the last 10 years. It was Northern Illinois that beat Northwestern a couple of years ago. NIU also beat Iowa one of those years. So there's always a Big Ten team that gets upset by a MAC school, and this looks to be the spot where that could happen here. There's not really a whole lot of coaches that come out to mind that I would just stay away from week one. The biggest thing is looking at coaches, as far as coaches to look to play on, guys who won't care about running up a score in some of these big spread games. Urban Meyer comes to mind with Ohio State this week playing Bowling Green. Yes, he coached at Bowling Green for 2 years, but that's not going to matter much. Ohio State, fell short of making a run for a title last year after winning the title the previous season before. Like I said, there was another team that they don't rebuild, they reload. They've got a ton of talent coming back, and they want to hit the ground running. They haven't lost to a in-state opponent. I want to say I think it's since the 1890s. So they're not going to take it easy on Bowling Green at all. They're gonna load up on them. So whereas say Hawaii, Michigan, Jim Harbaugh's another coach who's not quite going to take it easy on Hawaii, and that's a horrible scheduling spot for Hawaii too. We'll talk about that a little more. But there's some schools. Iowa's another school, for example, where they have a big spread. They don't really cover a lot of gigantic numbers historically, but if you look at the last couple of years when they're favorites of more than 24 points, they've covered 10 straight in that spot. So they're one of those teams where it's really hard to read right off the bat, but they usually do end up getting, if they do end up covering the game, it's not a complete runaway. It was a game where they kind of had to work and struggle through a little bit. It wasn't the easiest of cover situations for them. So you pick and choose here and there, but most of the time, like I said, it's just strictly situational. There's not a lot of it's hard to read into trends because you have so many changes that happen year after year.
Yeah, well, who do you think this year? We kind of talked about the Raiders being a year away from being a year away, or a year away from being that team. Who do you think that is in college football? Do you think the team that everybody's jumping on right now, is it Michigan? That's kind of the Raiders where everybody's, this is the team that, or is it even Nebraska's even being brought up in some circles as being a team that could be a dark horse at making a run at the college football playoff? I don't buy that, but who is that team that's you think is that everybody's in love with right now, but you still think needs one more year?
There's a couple of teams that kind of fit that bill. Oklahoma is one that possibly a team that everybody loves this year. I don't know if they're a year away, but I just don't see exactly where they're going to make this run. Is LSU. LSU has a ton of talent. They've always had a ton of talent. They've got a good coach in Les Miles, but I don't think they're. There's a lot of people were really high on them, and it had a lot to do with Leonard Fournette. And of course, he was kind of battling with an ankle injury. He's wearing a walking boot for a while, but he's out of that. And LSU always has a ton of talent, but they just always find a way to lose. Usually it's against Alabama, but they always find a way to get tripped up in a game middle of the year because they always have such a tough road in the SEC to where they don't quite make that transition in the last couple of years where, as opposed to the years where they were able to win a national title. But in the last couple of years, a lot of people have really been in love with LSU, and then they always find a way to kind of stumble over their own feet. So I could see that happening again this year. To Nebraska being maybe a couple of years away, I don't think this is going to be the brightest year for Nebraska.
I don't either.
Yeah, but but can Mike Riley can he eventually get things gelled together where starting to go in the right direction? Sure. I wouldn't be shocked if we 2-3 years from now, depending, especially if they recruit well. Why couldn't they be within the top of the ranks once again? So there's a few spots in the Pac-12. Everyone's high now as a conference. I'd say the Pac-12 would fall into that. I know we talked about Oregon and Washington in previous episodes, teams that people are in love with, and it's just, but they never quite seem to be teams that, especially Washington's case, they're never a team that really makes a huge splash nationally. I mean, it's been years and years since they were, a true contender for a national championship. So yes, they have good quality teams, and the Pac-12 is loaded as far as top to bottom team wise, as opposed to where they were 2-3 years ago. This is arguably the conference's best lineup of teams since they've expanded, but I don't see the Pac-12 bringing out a national champion this year.
All right. Well, we don't need to talk about NFL preseason.
No.
Week 4. All right.
Yeah.
Well, let's get into our best bets for the this week. I'll start off with my good bet. I'm going to go Washington covering 22 points at home versus Rutgers. Rutgers is not good, to put it politely.
No.
And traveling to the West Coast, I just don't see this being a good spot for Rutgers. And Washington's, they're a team that a lot of people are picking to have a good year, possibly win the Pac-12 North. I think they're going to want to come out and, lay the wood to Rutgers a little bit. I say they cover this 20. I know it's a big spread, but I say they cover that spread.
Well, it's moved
Rutgers
up.
is horrible in traveling.
It's moved up. It opened at 22.5. It's around 20. I'm seeing 26.5. And most books, a lot of people bet in it, and it makes sense, like you said. Rutgers, and we saw Rutgers play Washington State in Seattle, I want to say 2 years ago on opening weekend, and that was a game that was super high scoring, and I remember that because I had the over in that contest, which cashed easily. But Rutgers did not look sharp it was more of a matter of Washington State kind of falling apart, which they're a team that does that often. They'll have leads and let teams get back in games. Washington has a tough enough defense, and you look at the time difference. This is a 1 o'clock Central kickoff, so it'll be in Washington. This will be an 11 a.m. start. That's a really awkward time. You don't see a lot of Washington games start that early. They're usually more than the 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 2:30 range, if it's a day game. So I think that will catch Rutgers off guard. And I actually kind of like that total right there, that 54 and a half. I think if Rutgers can get some points on the board, but I think Washington will come back in a big way. I can see that game going well over that 54.
What is your good bet for this week?
My good bet, I played this game really early, and that was because there was a lot of injuries, a lot of injury questions going on with Georgia. So my good bet is still North Carolina plus the points. You can still get some threes, 2.5s at a lot of shops. I'm really high on this North Carolina team. They were really good last year. They were basically an interception away from being undefeated going into their ACC title matchup with Clemson. They played Clemson tough, lost that game, but they've got a ton of talent coming back. Their defense gets better and better. And they still have a lot of pieces back from that high octane up tempo offense. Georgia, have got some changes going on. Kirby Smart now is the coach down there. Chubb is back and healthy. Don't know how much time he's going to play. They're not going to try and rush him, obviously, even though this is a big opening game. The game's in Atlanta, which you would think would lead some semblance of a home advantage to Georgia, but North Carolina fans travel very well, and this is a big game. I think the Tar Heels actually end up getting the win. I'm not a big futures guy, but if I were to have made just kind of just a lottery ticket play on somebody, I would say North Carolina would be a long shot lottery ticket play for possibly a national champion. I would not be shocked to see them if they win this game. They could easily run the table within the ACC just as easily as they almost did last year, and possibly find a way to sneak into that college football playoff.
Yeah, if they lose a game, though, they're
in trouble. Yeah, it'll be tough.
Don't they have two FCS schools on their roster or on their schedule?
Not that I know.
I know they did last year. For some reason, I thought they did the same thing.
They do. They have James Madison September 17th, who's actually one of the better FCS teams, and then late in the year they have the Citadel. So those are games that they'll handle easily. But Georgia, their conference games are tough. At Florida State, at Miami, Virginia Tech at home. Pittsburgh at home is their conference opener. So they have enough strong conference opponents that can kind of drown out, if you will, those two FCS opponents. Georgia would be a big win, and then their other non-conference game at Illinois, which I expect to be a gigantic blowout. So I think I'm high on this Tar Heel team, and I think they'll be able to find a way to get it done on Saturday.
Larry Fedora might have gone to the Bill Snyder school of scheduling cupcakes, because the two FCS schools on the schedule, that's Bill Snyder 101 right there for scheduling non-con. My better bet for the week, I'm going to go in Ohio State Bowling Green. I'm going to go, right now it's 28-point spread. I'm going to go Bowling Green to cover. Okay. 28-point spread. Bowling Green, nothing to write home to mom about. But Ohio State, they had trouble last year in the first few weeks. I know it was mainly because they were starting Cardell Jones and not J.T. Barrett. Things probably would have been different if Barrett had been starting. Mm-hmm. But Barrett is starting now. He has relatively no competition around him right now. And I see Bowling Green covering this spread. Ohio State tends to, not really blow the doors off of anybody in the first couple weeks. They usually, when they're supposed to be good, they usually kind of sleepwalk through a couple of these games. I'm going Bowling Green to cover 28 points. What is your better bet for this week?
My better bet is it's an early Saturday game. I kind of teased it a little bit. Hawaii and Michigan. And looking at the spot, Hawaii has traveled 9,000 miles from Sydney, Australia, to Ann Arbor, Michigan. I think it's actually, I have to look at the exact number. I want to say it's 9,450 miles from Sydney to Ann Arbor. That's terrible travel if you had 2 weeks in between, but they're playing this basically with a 6-day stretch, and I'm sure they made a pit stop in Honolulu at some point, but either way, that is still horrendous travel. Hawaii is basically playing this game for a paycheck I think they're pretty much getting enough money to cover all of their flight costs for the entire season by going into the Big House playing this game. The spread, Michigan 40-point favorite. I'm not going to lay 40 points. Granted, I feel like they will cover that, but what I like here is the total at 54.5. I think
that seems really low.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And granted, yes, Hawaii could have completely dead legs and may not score a single point in this game. But if they were to happen to just get at least a touchdown, if it comes late in the game with their reserves against Michigan's third stringers, which could happen, I still think Michigan will at least put up about 7 touchdowns in this ball game. And that's the thing you have to look at with some of these high spread, low total games is how many touchdowns do you think will be scored between two teams within 60 minutes? That's the way I always kind of break these spots down. And so looking at this 54.5, I think Michigan at least comes out, scores about 5 touchdowns early, probably pick up about 2 or 3 late, and I think Hawaii could at least sneak 1 touchdown in within 60 minutes of this contest. So I like the over at 54.5.
Well, not to mention, okay, so Hawaii went and played a game in Sydney, Australia, which was that at like 9 o'clock? Was that 10 o'clock Eastern time? 10 p.m. Eastern time?
Yeah.
So like 5 o'clock their time, which I guess is reasonable.
Yeah, and it's a whole day ahead, too. I mean, the time breakdown is still mind-boggling for me of how
this is a disaster. I mean, you're playing a noon kickoff Eastern time for Hawaii, so that's, 5 a.m.?
Right.
Or 6 a.m.?
Yeah.
What a disaster. Like, I would, the jet lag, I don't know. Whoever did this scheduling needs to be shot. Yeah. Well, maybe not that extreme.
No, but yeah, it's bad. And you look at it, and there's no way to even combat it because you think, all right, if they were to leave Australia early and then get to Ann Arbor, well, not only are they a whole day ahead, day behind, that much of a jet lag difference time-wise, but then to get acclimated into being, like you said, in that earlier time, or if they leave Sydney, went home to Honolulu, got back to their normal time acclimation, then leave and go to Michigan and have to get back to the normal jet lag and time difference. Like I said, there was no pretty way to put it. It's a horrible schedule spot for Hawaii, but they said they had to, you got to pay the bill somehow, and that's pretty much what this game is signifying.
Yeah. The wonderful world of college sports. Well, my best bet, just looking at it, the opening total was 54 for Georgia Tech Boston College. It's now come down to 43.5, 44 in some spots. That's a big drop for a point total over over time. I'm going to go ahead and say that goes over. I know these are two horrible teams, but I got to think, like you said, I mean, how many touchdowns do I think are going to be scored? And I would have to get, neither team's defense is going to be very good. I'm going to say it goes over in this spot. I'm going to go point total over 43.5, and hopefully it drops a little bit more and take the over on that for sure. Yep. What is your best bet for this week?
My best bet, and this is actually going to be a client release tomorrow, so for all you listening, you're getting this one free and early. That's Kent State and Penn State, and they're playing 2:30 Saturday afternoon. Two teams that aren't really known for having much of offense. They're both defensive schools. Of course, Penn State being linebacker U. Kent State having one of the top defenses in the MAC. Things are a little different this year, though, in Happy Valley. They went and got a new offensive coordinator, a guy who came over from Fordham, which is a 1AA team. Joe Moorhead was the coach there. He comes over. He turned that 1AA program around from a 1-win team to a team that made it deep into the FCS playoffs and actually scored a ton of points. I think they blew out. I think it was they actually beat Army last year. They pulled the upset on them. They ran a super fast no huddle attack. He basically said one of the quotes over during the spring is that he wants to turn Penn State's offense into a copycat of Oregon. Well, it's not going to happen right away, but in due time, he implements his offense. He's got a quarterback now that's much better than Christian Hackenberg. He's got a guy who can actually run a decent offense. He's got all 5 offensive linemen coming back. He's got some senior running backs and wideouts. I think they're going to actually put up some serious points in this game. This is a good opponent for them to try and work out some of the kinks and get acclimated with the new offense. Kent State, not that impressive offensively, but they do have a lot of veteran guys, a lot of returning starters coming back. This is a very low total at 45. I'm actually seeing it dropping in some places to 44.5. I like this game over the total. Kind of in the same vein of what we were talking about. I think this number is just a little low based on how these two teams normally operate, and I think we're going to see a lot more points scored. Not going to be something crazy. I don't think we're going to see this game 38-35 or something of that nature. But I think we're going to see at least sail over that small total of 45.
Yeah. All right. Well, on that note, do you have any other advice before we get into week 1, before we get out of here for college football, and any advice for the following week for NFL?
The biggest advice with college football week 1 is do not go and get too crazy with your bankroll this week. I think everyone stresses this every single year. Yes, we're all very excited for college football to be back, and it's great to have these games going on. But choose your spots wisely, manage your bankroll. Do not get carried away with a lot of games early, in the start of the season.
Yeah, I wish I could say I'm not going to do that, but being excited about college football, I probably will be going down that road. I'm not going to overdo it.
Right, just manage the bankroll.
I'm going to overdo it. I'm just not going to make sure I don't have enough money for the rest of the season.
Right.
Well, before we get out of here, do you want to tell everybody where we can find you on Twitter, internets, all that good stuff?
Yes. Follow me on Twitter at AXSmithSports. I've been tweeting a lot more now than I was maybe about a month and a half ago. I'll be on there every day. Big news that kind of broke right before we got on air. On Fridays, and this is Bob, this is in your neck of the woods. On Fridays, I'll be on 93.7 The Ticket on the Brett Kane show with Bach. I just talked to Brett Kane earlier today. We exchanged emails and stuff, and they were looking for somebody, and I'm doing the spot now. I'll be talking Nebraska. I'll be breaking down some of the games of the week, giving out my play of the weekend on that station around 3:30 Central. So follow Brett Kane on Twitter. Follow 93.7 The Ticket. I'm really excited to start that on this Friday and every Friday around that time. And then follow me at my website, axsmithsports.com. The rest of the week, I got 2-for-1 sales on my monthly and weekly plays. So you sign up now for the month of September, you get the month of October. That includes all football, and that'll be all hockey in October as well. So that's all for that one low price. Same thing if you get the 2 weeks. You'll get week 1 of the college football, week 2 of college football, and the opening week of the NFL. So definitely check out axsmithsports.com. Bob, what do you have going on for this weekend?
This weekend, not sure who my second guest is going to be, but first guest is going to be Timmy Goodrich. He runs a softball tournament, memorial softball tournament for Tyler Allitz, a player who I coached and Timmy was friends with, who died in a car accident in 2014. And so we're going to be talking about his life and talking about the slow pitch softball tournament that it happens every year. So that will be on the on the show on Sunday, and then on Thursday, I'm sure Johnny has something up his sleeve tomorrow for that show. So yeah, just tune in here to Johnny Bobo tomorrow night and Bob Sullivan show on Sunday, and so enjoy, and hopefully we gave you some good advice tonight, and hopefully you guys don't lose too much money or listen to my advice as far as my best bets. So, on that note, we will see you next week, Tuesday. Actually, we're going to go to Tuesdays now. Next week.
We'll be Tuesdays. I'm not sure what time exactly the show will be on. Will it be the same time and just a different day, or?
Yeah, same time, different day. 9 o'clock Central, 10 Eastern. Here on Late Night Sports Radio, starting Tuesday next week, we will be giving you our best bets every week here on the Box Seats with Alex B. Smith and Bob Sullivan. Have a good night.